when I was a child, even back when I was 5, 4, 3 years of age, I remember sitting in Sunday school. And I remember my teacher at the time was Mrs. Izzo. And she had us making dioramas of the scripture stories, the creation story. And we had little Adam and Eve. She had chopped in half one of those clothespins. And we had clay hair on them, and they were standing in the garden, and we went through the entire story, brought a snake into the garden and everything, and worked the garden. I just remember that vividly. But I also remember vividly, as a child of that age, just being enamored with Jesus. Jesus was this amazing person that I met through these stories when we got into the New Testament and the Gospels, and when she was telling us about Jesus, he was touching people that everybody else were fleeing from. They were afraid of. Jesus was talking to people that other people left out. They were complaining that he was drunk or he was a sinner because he kept hanging around with these tax collectors and these drunks and these people that the religious folk wouldn't. And to me, Jesus was this amazing person that even at 5 years of age, I could tell I wanted to be like, I wanted to follow. I could tell at 5 years old that not everybody was accepted. There were people on the in and there were people on the out. I could tell by the words people used about others that not everybody was treated the same. And this Jesus stood in stark contrast to everything the world seemed to offer. I wanted to follow this Jesus. Jesus stood out to me. And it's in a story like John chapter 8 that I really find that perfect picture of Jesus. This Jesus that goes against everything else that the religious and the world would think is right. When I look at being a disciple of Jesus, his ways are different. We've been talking about following Jesus, being a disciple, doing what Jesus did. And everything that Jesus teaches is kind of contrary to what our first response is. If somebody hurts you, you hurt them back. If somebody offends you, you offend them back. We've heard it in the last couple weeks. Calls for violence or calls for, well, we need more guns or we need... And Jesus stands contrary to this entire attitude of fear and self-centeredness. Jesus says, love your enemies. Love your neighbors. And who is your neighbor? The Samaritan, the ones that you call dogs. The ones you're calling names, that's your neighbor, the person you're supposed to love. And following Jesus is hard because it really goes against our first instinct, our first reaction. And when we get to this story in John chapter 8, even though John chapter 8 verses 1 through 11 is not found in our earliest of manuscripts, we see John being written somewhere between 60, 70, 90 AD, the very first century. They believe that this story was added somewhere the first or second, the second or third century. This is something that was brought in to the scriptures, but it was found to be canon. It was found to be inspired and added to our scriptures when they made, this is what our scriptures are going to look like, around the 3rd to 4th century. It pictures Jesus perfectly. The Pharisees, the scribes, they're not bad people. They're really doing what they see is best. They know the stories of Israel. There was a time when Israel had the land of the Holy Land, and under Solomon they had this beautiful temple, and everything was going well except for the fact that the people of God were not living out their covenant with God and with each other. They weren't caring for the poor. They weren't sacrificing and loving God only. They were sacrificing and adding other gods to their worship. They were ignoring the cries of the orphans and the widows. And what happened was God let Babylon come in, and they were taken into exile. And the temple was destroyed. And so the Pharisees and the scribes, they're part of these, they had different groups in Judaism. They still do. And those groups were all fearful that the temple was going to be taken away from them. That Rome, who was already occupying their land, would kick them out of the land, destroy the temple, and they would have no homeland again. They would have no temple again. They would lose all that is sacred. And each group had their own way of dealing. The Essenes would go away into the desert, and they would just worship God there and keep strict laws there and believe that if they did that, they would be rescued. The Pharisees and the legal experts and the scribes believed that if we just kept that law, and we're going to make sure you're going to keep the law because we're going to build fences, so you can't get anywhere close to breaking that law. If you can't do this on the Sabbath, you can't work on the Sabbath, we're going to define it very narrowly. And so you can't do anything on the Sabbath. You're not going to get close to breaking that law. And so they were tenacious for the law. They had this zealousness. Why? Because they wanted to protect the people of God. They wanted to protect their community and their traditions. So their hearts were in the right place, but how they were going about it, Jesus called into question. Because in being so harsh, they were leaving people out. And so when we come to this story, the Pharisees and the legal experts, they're afraid of Jesus. Jesus is being called the Messiah by the people. And when Rome hears about a Messiah, Rome comes in and crucifies lots of people all at once. When Rome hears about any kind of dissent, Rome comes in with force. The scribes and the Pharisees are saying, we need to protect our neighbors, our people, from this danger. So we need to get rid of this Jesus. We need to find a way to silence him. And so what they do in this story is they know Jesus is going to be in the temple, and they bring this woman who is caught in adultery. They don't bring the man, they bring the woman. And they throw her down in front of Jesus and in front of all the people gathered to hear Jesus. And they say, all right, the law of Moses says we must stone her. What they don't say is Rome doesn't allow that. So whose side are you going to be on? Are you on the side of Moses? Are you on the side of Rome? They can discredit Jesus either way. And so they place that in front of Jesus. And Jesus just lets them sit in that question for a while and then answers. Let whoever has never sinned cast that first stone. One by one, starting with the oldest. They leave. Until Jesus is only there with this woman. Who is here to condemn you? No one. Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. The message is simple. If you here have ever felt like the woman, where people are looking to see you fail, if you ever felt like that woman, feeling ostracized and left out, judged and condemned. The only one that has the right to condemn us has said, I don't condemn you. And in that forgiveness, go and be free to not sin again. Go be free from what is holding you back in fear and anger. What has caused you to limit yourself, go be free from that. You are fully forgiven. What has happened in the past, whether it was 2 minutes ago, 2 years ago, or 20 years ago, doesn't get to define you according to Jesus. You are fully forgiven. But when I come to this story, I can't stop at that woman. Because, I've been there. I think we've all been there. Anybody who's had brothers and sisters have been there, as we all look to see how we can catch our brothers and sisters in something wrong and tattle on them. I remember that as a kid. My youngest brother always got the best of everybody else. But you played that game as a kid. Sometimes we played as adults to get ahead at work. Sometimes we get the brunt of it as people manipulate and move things. We've all been there. But I think we've also all been where the Pharisees and the scribes are, taking up our stones, ready to hurl it at someone. I don't like that person, and I can tell you every single reason why. They can do no right, and I've got my stone. Whether it's been in my thoughts only, whether it's in my words to them, whether it's in the gossip to other people. Sometimes it's a group of people. They're obvious sinners. They're obviously bad. And we let a bad narrative start for an entire group of people in our hearts and our minds. And we stone them. We act out of fear of them. We've seen it happen in the past week in our nation. Stones were thrown. We have verbal stones that are thrown on a regular basis in our society and in our homes. As we judge one another, as we condemn one another. The invitation is to remember we all are in need of forgiveness and grace. To drop our stones. The invitation then is to move from just identifying with the woman or identifying with the crowd that is ready to stone someone to the place of Jesus, where we become active peacemakers. Active people who bring life, where other people are talking about death and threatening death, that we could come into a situation and say, let's put our stones down. Let's see the humanity in the other person that we disagree with. Let us see the humanity in the person that has offended us or hurt us. Let us see the humanity in each other and let us drop the stones, because that's the gift. Jesus didn't just free that woman. Jesus freed the crowd. Jesus offered them forgiveness as well. They don't have to add to the violence of the world. They could drop their stones. They didn't have to continue the judgmental attitude, the condemnation. They didn't have to continue the racism. They didn't have to continue bigotry. They didn't have to continue the anger towards the people they disagreed with. He invited them to drop their stone. He freed them. They didn't have to carry the weight of the image of someone being stoned to death at their hand. Can we, as the Christians, in our society today become like Jesus, who offers a different solution, a nonviolent solution, a way of everyone seeing the humanity in the other. Bridging that gap, taking away the anger, and saying, no, you're my neighbor, you're my brother, you're my sister. I'm going to drop my stone. Will you drop yours? Because that's the way of Jesus. It's not just not being a person committing adultery. It's not just being a person not ready to stone someone. It's about being a person actively bringing peace into relationships and into community. Can we be active peacemakers? Because that's what our world needs. So the next time you're in that political argument, the next time you hear that racist joke, the next time you hear someone degrading whatever group, immigrants, homosexuals, whatever group is out there that we have these words for, the other political party, can we say, no, they're made in the image of Jesus. They're made in the image of our God. Jesus took on our likeness so that we don't have to live broken anymore. Let's drop our stones and embrace the humanity, embrace the image of God in each other, and be peacemakers. Because the world's not going to change until you and I decide not to participate in the throwing of stones, whether it be in the political realm, whether it be in the theological realm, whether it be in our own relationships, whether it be in our community, in whatever shape and form it comes. You and I can drop our stones. Because it always takes that one. It only took that one elder to drop the stone, and then everybody else started dropping the stones. We can be the peacemakers and show the world how not to live in fear, but how to live in this love that brings wholeness. Not just peace, no conflict. Conflict isn't bad. It's how relationships grow. But peace is looking for the wholeness of everyone involved. We are called to be peacemakers, to be Jesus, who says, can anybody here say they haven't sinned? Let us drop our stones. When you came into the sanctuary today, you were given a stone. Some of you who might feel like the woman who's been thrown in front of Jesus might need to take that and find a pond or a puddle or something and throw it into that puddle and say, my sin has been cast into the depths of the ocean and God remembers them no more. Some of us need to take that stone to a garden or somewhere and we need to sit there and say, I've been ready to throw a stone at my husband, my wife, this person, my neighbor, whoever. Name the person. I'm not going to throw the stone and drop it. Some of you might want to keep the stone as a reminder so that when you're going through your purse, you're reminded, I am not to cast stones. I am to be the peace of Christ in our world. So I offer you those three options with those stones. Go and find what you need to do with that stone, either as a symbol of your forgiveness or as your decision not to cast a stone. Let us be like Christ and be active peacemakers in our world. Amen.